Hello and most welcome to 1479. We are progressing here. And I continue with the article by F. David Peat, Blackfoot Physics and European Minds. And we're now coming to the second read of language. We are currently on page 569. Thank you very much. It's the second paragraph, the sub-rubric language. The Blackfoot I have met speak of their traditional ways as a science. Of particular significance is the way that this science is enfolded within their language. This metaphor. The language contains the map of the land, the relationships to the energies and spirits of all living things, the rocks, the trees, the plants, birds, fish, and animals. Of Carlo Rovelli, the Italian physicist, shows that even to be singular is a relationship. To be apart is in itself a relationship or a difference. Coming from what is more foundational, the establishment of asymmetry. The flux in which they live is perfectly expressed in what could be termed their process language. European languages have a heavy reliance upon nouns and lend themselves so well to a type of thinking that deals in categories and Aristotelian logic. Our physical reality is that of objects in interaction with one another, nouns linked with verbs. my comment here, the Cartesian res cogitans and res extensa. So similar. And lends themselves so well to a type of thinking that deals in categories and Aristotelian logic. Our physical reality is that of objects in interaction with one another, nouns linked with verbs. Very, very important point made there. This thinking also extends into the abstract and psychological spheres, when the world of our experiences relationships and feelings becomes a collection of objects of thought to be manipulated, generalized, abstracted, and acted upon. How eagerly do we build categories and concepts? How literally do we take our language games? How easily do we become trapped in empty philosophical argument? And commentary is odd that he's using language games as pejorative here. But I think it's more funny than objectionable. While our problems may certainly arise, this sort of trap is not present within a language where the verbs takes center stage. Within Blackfoot, all is movement, process and transformation. Nouns as objects emerge in a secondary way through the modification of verbs. To them, the English language is a straitjacket, which forces their minds into a world of objects, categories, and restrictive logic. This is a point made by Julian James and Richard E. Lind, that change in language in early Greek antiquity with Homer and the Iliad turned many verbs into object and noun sentences. Language itself became less telling, less forceful, less knowledging. Take as an example healing. To the Western mind, this is a transitive business in which the doctor, noun, acts upon the patient, another noun, to bring about a change of state, sort of adverbial function. For the Blackfoot, healing is a process. This process is itself the primary reality. Rather than that of patient and doctor. Healing often involves singing. In this case, in speaking about healing, the process of singing is the focus of the linguistic act. Rather than singing being performed by someone, the pure act of singing is taking place. Singing is singing itself. It is out of this singing that healing unfolds to restore the previously sick person. This shows that life and the world is a process. It's Heraclitus all over again. All is in flux, even what is static. And I also see here how singing could be more primordial than speaking and talking. Steven Pinker, the famous linguist, has stated that singing is parasitic on language, a sort of residual, archaic trace or something coming out of language. It seemingly makes much more sense to say that singing is the first. Again, an analogy from contemporary science may help. According to classical physics, nature consists of objects in interaction with each other. Observation is an objective business that reveals the world for what it is, thereby my comment producing theory, originating in the word for theatre. Or Timosen, as in the article by Hans Rule. Taumatsen. It makes us shut off from what we observe. We are no longer in it. The distance is temporal as well as spatial. Quantum theory, by contrast, stresses that observation is participation. Within any act of observation, the observer and observed are united in a holistic and unanalyzable way. Observation is a process within which it is no longer possible to speak of the independent existence or properties of the observer and the observed. I would say the atom itself as an independent entity comes all the way back from Greek language with the esteem, a special take on to be. That's sort of stagnify or solidify into existence, which has, in modern language, a decisive role to play. As the Danish quantum physicist Niels Bohr pointed out, the paradoxes and difficulties of quantum theory arise out of our need to employ ordinary language in our discourse. However, this language, be it English or Danish, historically developed in a particular way and within a world of classical objects. We are suspended in this language so that we do not know which way is up and which is down. By contrast, the Blackfoot live in a world that is much closer to that quantum domain. A world of flux, transformation, and essential relationship, far from that of absolute categories, fixed objects, and rigid Aristotelian dualities. Their language perfectly reflects this world. Harmony and balance. Knowledge is not partitioned in a holistic world, and Blackfoot science is not simply confined to the material. It embraces society and good government. Its norm is balance and harmony. Society is not an artifact built by individuals. With rights and freedoms. Rather, it is a process of renewal, a coherent whole of which emerge persons with responsibilities and obligations. An individual exists in respect to his or her relationships with society and nature. When we speak about wholeness, I think about the Klein bottle. I am not sure that you are familiar with it, but from the might 30 episodes we put into the Klein bottle, it has a whole that creates the wholeness. In the Parmenidean fix, where everything is existence, there is no possibility of a whole that can make a subject see and take knowledge of the wholeness. This is referred to as interpenetration. The very solidness of our language, which takes literally more energy to produce, doesn't lend itself to that feather-like flexibility and lightness. Heidegger pointed out that modern thinking is not thankful, danken, it's denken, heavied down by nouns, adjectives, and predicates. It is unmaking of the world, as Ian McGilchrist has it. It defies wholeness. It is almost as it thrives and wants non-wholeness and non-health. Niels Bohr can be said to be a fighter against this rigidity. And also the very blockage of understanding. Not letting things be what they are. I think this very tendency is what makes for the dominance also of the left hemisphere, pointed out by Sir Roger Sperry and Ian McGilchrist, and also John Cutting. The left hemisphere has a special attention of never seeing wholeness and not being able to take in depth. Instead, it creates small, disparate, unconnected things. Also clearly to be compared to modern knowledge made up of isolated facts and bits of information with no connection to each other. And where many subjects even further make this fragmentization even clearer. The left hemisphere doesn't live with the world. It picks out the different bits and then quantifiably making a pile out of them, stowing them on top of each other to make its copy of knowledge. It's time for us. No, hur mycket tid har det gått?
30 minutes.
Oh. So we make time for a summary here. In the Blackfoot language, which is a process language, all is in context. Nothing is left out. Even time is a wholeness. And they are still understanding that to perceive, to touch the object is the same as time. What takes time? With this understanding, both time and not time, and the two oppositions that we usually cannot come over, inner and outer, becomes healed in a wholeness. These four ingredients make up a whole, although they are opposites. I think that is the most important point. In the static Western languages, contradictions and oppositions are always problematic. Something that we need to get rid of. They need to be sawn out, cut out of the flesh for it to become supersymmetric. And this goes for the way of understanding that language makes possible. Grasping the object without understanding what it means is going to the secondary. Just with the cup as with the atom. In quantum physics, it is pointed out existence doesn't give any knowledge. It cannot be used to understand what happens. and the same in our everyday experience. The greater whole gets lost, like in this immense hall. We lose out of perspective, and we lose out of what Heidegger calls localization, Befindlichkeit. So, as was mentioned in the text, we don't know what is up and what is down. How absolutely true. Before up and down and front and back is something much more fundamental, recognized by the new physics and also often taken up by the British, Maltese creativist Edward de Bono, and that is asymmetry. That there is a left and that is there is a right, and that they are different. Without this orientation, there cannot be an up, neither can there be a down. It's a sine qua non. It's, if you like to use a Kantian phrase, it's an a priori. I wouldn't like to go into the Kantian dimension, but it's before everything. And if we understand that, once more our words and our actions and our thinking would be full again. Because we don't know asymmetry or chirality, we'll be struggling to look for the byproducts, which is up, which is down. And which is the atom, and which is the eye looking at the atom from a theoretical mood. It's a specific attention, and it doesn't yield much understanding. Maybe a comment from my colleague here?
So up and down is not fundamental to nature, as we have seen in these days, thanks to the paper of Dave Morris, but also quite the research of Steven Rosen. Chirality, that is asymmetry, is fundamental on the other hand. But I will not go into that now. I will read one phrase from page 568. Goethe studied the multiplicity that arises out of unity. Goethe's notion of the archetype of all plants resonates with indigenous concepts of the guardians or keepers of plants and animals. By carrying a piece of bone, a Blackfoot comes into direct contact with the guardian or keeper of the buffalo. And this made me think about relics and bones. Even today, exorcists, Catholic exorcists, they carry a lot of relics of bones of saints, and they have effects when they put a relic on the, for instance, of a sick person during the night, or even instantly there is a reaction, positive, healing. So this is a good analogy, and I believe in at least in these exorcists. And I think we need to make exorcism great again and use bones of saints And it's not superstitious, so it was during the Reformation, Martin Luther they thought it was superstition. But this indirectly shows that there is more on the surface that we can guess. I give it back to you, Hans.
Yes, Kalle, thank you very much for that comment. Well, churches are an excellent example how they have been cauterized and sterilized for all things spiritual. It was mentioned earlier in the text. The ritual is what opens the space to the spiritual, and the actual doing. Our language, together with classical physics, has made matter something so far from everything spiritual that we have turned the spiritual into something as transcendental as matter itself. We made in this process understanding scarce, almost non-existent. Blackfoot Indian languages and the Algonquin languages makes for hope. It makes for going into a deeper understanding and to connect with our inner again. Because once we understand, I think, that for it to be something outer, there must also be something inner. The arm in the Klein bottle, or the touching finger that touches the other hand in an asymmetrical relationship. The first difference. That creates everything. I think therefore that the Blackfoot and the Algonquian have kept that connection to the heart as well as the outer world, which they so much participate in. There's a little story I heard the other day where an Indian was brought on a car trip, and for every part of the countryside he passed, he had stories about the specific locations. What happened there, what is there, and what you can do there, all in verbs. And as the car accelerated, he spoke quicker and quicker. That is connection to the earth. And there is no contradiction here, because connectedness to the material also makes for the spiritual, makes for the higher, and makes for something that is permanent, more permanent than the material. And there is a very clear understanding of that in the Indian languages as well in the Indian cultures. Very interesting. I say thank you very much for your patience, and maybe we can have a little panorama of this beautiful inside of the farmhouse in Gothenburg.
Thank you, and perhaps it's a good panorama for the Blackfoot Indian.
Oh yeah.
Even
definitely.
though the most of palms are from the Canary Islands.
Ah,
And behind you, you have from Madagascar. This is from Madagascar, absolutely.
we are in
So
nature. And
this is Madagascar. So thank you. Goodbye.